Hey there, today's all about wood chips in your walkways, why you should use them and maybe why you shouldn't use them, but I do. Let me explain why. Now, there are many reasons you should or should not use wood chips in your walkways, and I'm going to go through them today so you can help make a decision. There's no real order in importance, but one of the things that I like is just the way they look. And I know that might sound silly to some of you, but working here makes a big difference when you have the farm looking nice and tidy, so check it out. Things look great. Now, one of my previous careers was a professional brewer, and one thing I learned about working, especially in the smaller breweries that were sort of on display like in brew pubs, is the brewery needs to look tidy, organized, and clean. People will make a judgment or opinion about your beer before they even try it when your brewery looks tidy and clean or it looks messy and sloppy and dirty. So the same sort of goes to how your farm looks. Now, if your farm is nice and tidy and clean and the rows are straight and there's no weeds, well, people will think the veggies will be better. Now, that's not always the case, but sometimes if you look at a farm and things are sloppy, there's tools everywhere, there's weeds, things are really crooked and weird, someone might say, oh, I don't know, their veggies may not be that good. So, and I know that's not always the case, but it always helps to give yourself an advantage in that situation. Also, you guys have seen lots of photos of the farm or videos, and you know what the farm looks like, and I think it looks great, and you might as well try to give yourself as much advantage as possible on marketing and social media and stuff like that. So a lot of people don't put a lot of thought into their walkways. It's just somewhere where you walk and you don't want weeds, and that for most people that's where it ends. But the reality is the walkways can do a lot for you. I was just listening to the No-Till Market Garden podcast with Farmer Jesse, and if you haven't listened to that, please check it out. There's some just awesome people on there, but one of the most recent episodes was Charles Dowding, which most of you have probably heard of, and he talked a lot about the walkways in the episode, and it was, I don't know, it was a lot of stuff that I'd sort of thought about, but some other cool stuff too, so go check that out. Another thing here is the wood chips in general. They add a lot of fungal life to your soil. Now, compost generally, and I'm speaking very generally here, is probably going to be more bacteria focused, and if you are interested in reading more about that, there's a great book called Teeming with Microbes by Jeff Lowenfels, and I'll leave the link to the book down below. And it's sort of always a balance of keeping the bacterial and fungal life in balance. So because I add a lot of compost, which is going to be more bacterial focused, the wood chips add more fungal life, and so that balance will help keep the soil balanced. And if those sort of things are needed in the beds, then they can be accessed. It's not like there's a wall between the walkway and the beds. So, having extra biology going on in the walkways can also be very beneficial in your beds. So another reason you might want to use wood chips is weed control. Now, you've heard some people mention this before, and it does help. It's not going to eliminate your weeds unless you put like a foot of wood chips in there. But if you've watched some of my other videos, especially like how I start new beds, is that I try to eliminate all the grass and weeds before I even start planting. So really there isn't much here. Now the wood chips will help suppress some weeds, and some that do come up you just take care of. You can use a stirrup if you want, or you just hit it with the flame weeder when you're doing the bed as well. And that's sort of my strategy with that. So I've noticed it does help a little bit. The weeds are still going to pop up if they want to pop up, but the bigger thing about that is to try to get rid of the weeds before you even start. Another thing is moisture control. One of the things that's great about the wood chips is that, here in central North Carolina, it's really hot in the summer, and we also get some serious thunderstorms. So because I'm on a slope here, what I noticed when I first started last year is that I used wood chips because I thought it was cool, and then I set up another field block that didn't have wood chips, and when it rained really hard, it kind of just washed all the soil down the hill, which was not good. So it also helps hold in moisture, and it also helps keep erosion. Now, in the style that I'm doing here, I'm adding a lot of compost to my beds, and so they sort of become more and more raised as you add more material. And with that, the walkways will get lower, not just because you're adding more material, but you're also walking on the walkways and compressing that. So I like to add wood chips in there to sort of fill in the gap and keep it level. And that sort of keeps everything sort of intact, so when it rains really hard, it keeps things from kind of washing down the hill. So that's really great. The other thing is it does hold a lot of moisture too, and I've noticed this a lot that, you know, there were some beds that as I was building out new beds this year and I didn't have the wood chips in place, when it rained really hard and then it didn't, you know, and it started to dry out, the areas that didn't have wood chips in the walkways were definitely drying out, and I was getting, you know, uneven germination or, you know, reduced growth and stuff like that. So by, you know, holding the moisture in the walkways as well, it keeps the moisture in the beds. So I'm in front of a pile of wood chips here, and these are a little bit finer than I'd like, but this is what I got. And I just want to show you something about the moisture in here. So it's been pretty hot the last couple days. It has not rained, but if I just peel away just a little bit, hopefully you can see how moist that is. So you can really see how much moisture gets contained within the wood chips, even just slightly under the surface. So that's a real bonus to hold water, especially if it doesn't rain a lot, or you know, you're limited on irrigation. Or the other thing is it's a more even system where it doesn't, like, you water it and then it dries out really hard. It just kind of keeps it a little bit more moist. The wood chips will also break down over time, and all that carbon will get put into the ground here. So, you know, if you are importing wood chips from somewhere else onto your farm, you are putting a lot of carbon into the ground. A lot of these wood chips from these tree companies, they actually bring them to a landfill and have to pay to get them disposed. So if you can find a company that will give them to you, you're kind of a win-win situation. You're taking your carbon, put it on your farm, and keeping it going from a landfill where it probably won't decompose correctly. So let's talk about some negatives. One negative is the wood chips can fall off from the walkways into your beds, and that is unfortunate. You can see, hopefully you can see here, this is a newly planted bed of kale, and you can see that there's bits of wood chips in there, and that is one of the main reasons that I did not want to use wood chips moving forwards. But the reality is that it's really not that bad. If you can get coarser wood chips, that helps too. But because I use the Jang cedar, it doesn't really struggle so much if it's a little bumpy and stuff like that. So it can get through that within reason. Of course, if it's just full of wood chips, then you're not going to be able to do it. You have to rake it out. Or I'm hand transplanting lettuce and stuff like that. Another thing you got to think about is the cost. Now, I have been getting wood chips free from tree companies, and that has been great. I've gotten plenty of loads last year. The issue when you're looking for free wood chips is that you're sort of at the mercy of the tree companies. You get them when you get them, and sometimes you need some and you can't get any. So if you want to go the free route, just call around to all the tree companies and ask them and try to get on their list or whatever. Eventually someone will call you back and say, hey, I'm in your area, you know, I'll bring you some wood chips. I've had a local municipality also give me some wood chips. The last bunch of wood chips, we had some tree work done here, and they chipped up all the limbs, and so I was able to use that. And I still have a little bit of that left. So getting them, you know, could be an issue for you depending on where you are, and you might have to pay for them, and you have to consider that too. So yeah, the two negatives, the third negative would be the time. You have to put in time to, you know, put the wood chips down. So that's another thing you got to deal with too if you want to factor that in. Another thing worth mentioning and discussing is the nitrogen tie-up. People claim that the wood chips will pull nitrogen away from the soil and keep it from the plants that need it. And I have not found that situation here. And again, Charles Dowding also mentioned that that's not true if the wood chips are applied to the surface and not put inside the soil. So because I'm just putting it on the top, I really haven't noticed that as an issue. So how do I actually get the wood chips in the walkways? Now, maybe you guys can tell me a better way. This is just what I found that works the best in terms of the most accurate. You just don't want wood chips getting everywhere because they're pulling out of your beds and stuff, which becomes a nightmare. So the one tool that I use most of the time is this guy. This fork has got, I think, 10 tines. It's a lot more efficient than using one that's got a smaller amount of tines, like 4, like a normal digging fork or pitchfork. It just allows you to pick up a little bit more, especially when the chips are a little bit smaller. It allows you to pick up a little bit better. I generally will just shovel this into buckets and then pour the buckets in the walkways and do it that way. Now, if there's the wood chips are further away from where I have to go, I'll fill up a wheelbarrow, I'll bring that wheelbarrow over and then put it into buckets. I just find that putting the wheelbarrow in the aisle, in the walkway, and trying to dish it out that way, it gets everywhere. So you can be a lot more accurate with the bucket. workflow and how I get this done. Last year I would sort of just let it go, and then every month or so I'd come in, try to put wood chips down in the whole farm. And it was one of those things I dreaded because it was a lot of work and it was very repetitive, and I don't know. So now this year what I'm doing is when I turn over a bed and I add compost, I just spend a few extra minutes and do the walkways on either side. That way it's always level, and it's just sort of, you know, I'm chipping away at it versus having a larger chore that I have to do less often. I also do use wood chips along the border of the field blocks, and that helps retain moisture on the ends of the beds, but it also keeps grass and other stuff from growing in. Hopefully that was helpful for everybody. Decide if you want to use wood chips or not. It's just what we do here at Satin Hill Farm. It seems to be working really well for us, and there's pluses and minuses about everything that you do. Hope you found this helpful. Please like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. It'd be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.